Please hold the line. We will answer your call as soon as possible.
I'm Michael Schneider, CEO of Service, and this is another edition of Please Hold. Today my guest is Jordan Metzner, who founded Washio and apparently is an acclaimed rapper and former CEO of a burrito company. So we're going to get into all that and more on this edition of Please Hold. Jordan, thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Michael.
Of course. So I read your Twitter profile. You know, we've known each other for a while, but I never actually read your Twitter profile. And it says you're an entrepreneur, a musician, a runner, and a bad speller. And I dug a little bit deeper into the musician part of it, and I read that you like creating freestyle rap and beats. And the first question I have for you is, do you have any plans to take that show on the road?
As soon as someone invites me. I've been making music on my guitar, turntables, or computer for years. But I'm not very good at it, so it's more of a pleasurable thing than something I could take out professionally. But if you dig deep enough, you probably heard me rap somewhere on the internet.
I haven't yet, but that's going to be my first thing I do once we're done with this. I'm gonna
Okay, no problem.
Is that like therapy? Is that a form of just like creative release for you? Like, how does that intersect with your business career, your entrepreneurial career?
I mean, I feel like as busy as I am, I don't get enough time to do it. But once you get in the zone and you're like making music, then you really lose focus of kind of, you know, your day-to-day problems or what's going on in the world or whatnot, because you really start focusing just on, you know, the beat or the rhythm or whatever is going on. So I think it's always fun to kind of just, you know, take your mind off of what's going on and do something a little more fun.
Cool. Well, next time you have a show in LA, invite me.
Okay, no problem.
Buy extra tickets. So talk to me about your burrito company. Not a lot of people I know have founded a burrito company. Was that just out of school? Is that right?
Yeah. I moved to Argentina right after college, and we had no idea. It was I had studied abroad in Spain while I was in school, and you know, Barcelona was an amazing place, but the euro was at $1.30. And when I started to look kind of where there are opportunities where I can continue to learn Spanish, we saw Argentina at like 30 cents to the dollar. So it looked like a really cheap place to be. It was really exciting. I'd never been there before. So a friend of mine from college and I each bought a one-way ticket and just said, we'll figure it out, type of thing.
And so you started it was called the California Burrito Company, but it was started in Argentina.
Yeah, so, you know, within a few months of being there, we wrote a business plan for real estate development, and we realized quickly that we couldn't finance that plan. And so we said, you know, what kind of business can we do that we could self-finance? And Chipotle had just filed their S1 in the US. They were having explosive growth. They had just opened a Chipotle where we went to college, and you could see lines around the block. And obviously, being from California, I love burritos and Mexican food, and we said, like, why don't we bring this kind of subway of burritos to LatAm? And there really wasn't any kind of fast-serve, quick-serve Mexican food at the time, and so we opened our first store within 3 to 6 months of landing in Argentina.
Did it work?
So at first it didn't work. And there's a lot of reasons why. I mean, you know, the Argentinians have a distinct taste for non-spicy food, and they always connotate Mexican food with a lot of spicy food. And so, you know, we started in a downtown area, really serving people for lunchtime, and the business was doing just kind of okay. And then the World Cup happened, and we had the World Cup, and basically everything stops in Argentina during the World Cup, and our business almost came to a halt. And literally the month after World Cup ended, we just saw 20 to 30% month-over-month growth consistently for a few years. And so with that, we were able to expand. We opened a second store and then a third store, and then we began to franchise, and we opened about 14 stores in 6 countries over 5 years.
That's awesome. Is it still going today?
Yeah, so in about 2010, my co-founder and I, who started it, sold most of our shares. We still hold a small equity piece. There's still stores all over LatAm, so there's stores in Colombia and Bolivia, Ecuador, and Argentina, but we don't run it day to day, but we're happy it's still around.
That's awesome. What is it like? I think most entrepreneurs are used to starting a business in the U.S., at least that I've met.
Sure.
I know people outside the U.S., but a lot of people have started businesses in the U.S., and I think this is a fairly straightforward and easy market to just spin up a company, get a bank account, start payroll, like just basic stuff. How would you say the U.S. compares to your experience in Latin America?
So in some ways, it's a lot easier to do business here. Obviously, like what you said, bank account and things like that. And in some ways, there's some more challenges here. But just to open a business bank account there, you'd walk in with a stack of papers. I'm trying to get my hand up high enough, like this big, and it would take days, if not weeks, to get the account open, and they'd have to do research on you. I mean, it would take forever. Getting change at the bank was almost impossible, and you'd have to fight the bank so you could get enough. Basically like quarters and 50-cent pieces so you could give people their change. When operating cash flows, all of the employees are unionized, so it doesn't matter what the industry is, there's 100% unionization. So there's definitely a lot of challenges. And I expected, because I hadn't really run a big operation in the US, that everything here would be just much easier. But a lot of things are easier, but some things are still challenging. And I think the U.S. is a great place to do business. It's probably one of the best in the world, but there's probably a lot of things, especially, living in California, that we could do to make doing business a little bit easier.
What do you think is easier there that we could learn from?
That's a good question. I think, they did, God, that's a really good question. I have to think about that one a little bit more. Let me get back to you.
We're doing pretty well here. So I read that you're a SAG member. Is that true?
Yeah. So I was
you're
a
the most
child.
varied guy I think I've ever.
I was a child actor. So growing up in LA, I did some TV commercials and some student films and a few animated things. And so I got my SAG card at the age of 12, and I don't think I've worked since then. So not a very actor.
In your head, you're so LA, and then you're an actor, and all of a sudden, I don't know. Did it go to your head as a little kid?
Do you want me to send you a signed headshot of my 7-year-old self?
I would love to have that. We'll put it in the video.
Cool.
I also read that you've driven across the U.S. 8 times. Is that true?
Yes, I went to school in Indiana.
Okay.
And so after my freshman year, I brought my car out there, so I went back and forth a few times every year through school. And then after I got married with my wife, we bought a Prius and we drove from LA to San Francisco to New York and back again. And so that was my last kind of cross-country trip. But yeah, I absolutely love driving cross-country. I've been to a bunch of places that you probably never normally visit. Got to make stops in towns where friends are that you maybe wouldn't fly out of your way to get there. And so it's an awesome experience. I highly recommend it to everybody.
What's your favorite fast food chain on the road?
Well, In-N-Out, obviously.
How did they get you to Arizona?
Actually, they have it in Texas now, and
Really?
so yeah, they have it in Dallas. But yeah, it doesn't get you far enough. Obviously, the Applebee's and Chili's of the world are usually the places you end up eating as you get to these smaller towns. But if I really have to go fast food, I prefer to go Subway, I guess.
Yeah, fair enough. So talk to me about failure. I also read that you started a software as a service business that didn't go so well. How important do you think failure is in business, and what lessons have you learned from your failures?
I've definitely failed a bunch of times, and I'm sure I'll do it a bunch more times. I think, part of being an entrepreneur is taking risk and trying to start something. And, usually that something is just an idea that then, matures into something. And you never know if it's going to work. And in the reference of the SaaS business you talk about, I built some software that allowed doctors' offices to send their patients, text message reminders about appointments and things like that. And I focused so much on building out the software, and I got it so well working, and everything was awesome. And then I went to the sales part of it, and I realized that I was just completely underfunded. I had no idea what I was doing, and selling to a cohort like doctors is very, very, very challenging. I don't want to say impossible, but it's very difficult. And that's because they're busy, they're working. The last thing they want is a sales pitch, and to get in front of them is very challenging. And inevitably, if they run their own practice, they're the only decision maker. So, I mean, just so many things that I learned through the process of, how I failed in that business. But I think that's probably why now I focus a lot more on consumer tech, because I realize kind of B2B sales is so challenging, but consumer brings its whole other challenges, as you know.
I had no idea that's what you were doing at your SaaS business. In 2001, I started a business called eCall, and it was designed to do electronic recalls. So instead of the little postcards, do it via email.
Awesome.
And I had it all going. I was running a design business for building websites at the time as well. And just a stupid 21-year-old kid, I was like, the shiny thing that exists right now, I could go build a website for $20,000, and then that's amazing. Or I can start this e-call business and spend time with dentists and doctors and optometrists, which didn't sound as sexy. And I very stupidly did not pursue the business of automating that. And I'm still amazed that I get postcards from my doctors today. So at least one of us had succeeded. We could have saved a lot of trees.
Absolutely.
I was sitting with Jasper and Bryce the other day at TaskUs, and I mentioned that you and I were going to chat. And Jasper actually said, you gotta ask him about TaskUs, because he's the reason why we started TaskUs. And I didn't dig too much deeper, but I wanted to hear, are you like the third co-founder we've never heard of TaskUs, or talk to me about that?
Not from a cap table perspective.
That's not fair.
Yeah, tell those guys. I was operating my burrito restaurant in Argentina, and it was obviously a place where a lot of expats would come. You live in Argentina for a long enough period of time, you kind of start to miss burritos and some American food. And so Jasper and Bryce had emailed me and said, hey, we're very interested in starting a business in Argentina. Do you mind if we come to your store and talk to you? And I said, sure, absolutely. We set up a time, and they came in the middle of summertime. It's got to be 90 degrees outside. It was probably 90% humidity. And in come these two young kids in full suit and tie. And they're just like dripping sweat. And we sit down, and they proceed to tell me why opening the first, yogurt shop, i.e. like a Pinkberry of Argentina, was going to be the best business ever. And I probably just scared the crap out of them. I mean, I told them why operating a restaurant in Argentina was a bad idea. I mean, why yogurt was a bad idea in the land of ice cream eaters, and so many other things. And I said, the only real way to make money in Argentina is through monetary arbitrage. And that is, basically paying for, labor here in pesos and selling it in dollars. And I said, that's the only way people can make real money down here. And so those guys left the office, left my restaurant actually, super defeated. I had just killed their whole yogurt idea. But it really got them thinking that there's an opportunity for kind of labor arbitrage, and that's when they decided to look to the Philippines, where they found the cheapest labor possible, and started to build TaskUs. And now, obviously, as you know, it's an incredibly successul business. I think they have over 5,000-6,000 employees. A really awesome story.
I'm going to call you the chairman of TaskUs from now on, because that's what I think you deserve. That's a great story.
Let's send him this video.
I'm going to send him this video for sure. So now you're running Washio. Tell me the basics. Why did you start it? What you guys do? Where you're based? What markets you're in? What does the future look like? Are you guys profitable? Whatever you want to share about the company.
Cool. So Washio is on-demand dry clean and laundry. So you can order on your mobile phone or through web, and you simply select the pickup and drop off time, and one of our ninjas, which is what we call our drivers, will come by your house and pick up your dirty laundry or dry cleaning, or both, and then deliver it back to you in 24 to 48 hours. And, the original idea came from the fact that I just absolutely hate doing laundry. While I lived in Argentina for a while.
Doing laundry?
Some people do, oddly enough. Well, thankfully there's enough people who like to do laundry that we do it for our customers. But, I just hate doing it. And I used to get it done for me in Argentina, because there was kind of these little laundry shops, and you would just drop off your stuff and it'd be ready the next day. And when I came back to the States, I found that a lot more challenging to find, and I just found it to be a very time-consuming process. So when I was in New York, I experienced my first Uber ride, and it was an incredibly magical sensation. the fact that there was a car waiting for us and we didn't have to transact or make a payment when we were exiting the vehicle. And it was just pretty magical for especially a city like New York, where you're just constantly kind of having to call the car and, obviously mingling with tip and things like that. So I realized that there was definitely a future and opportunity in what I would call kind of like mobile local commerce. And so I really started to rack my brain around, what can I do in the space where kind of mobile local commerce could provide some value. And so, I started to think about laundry, and I thought, it's a very expensive machine. It's hyper underutilized. When people pick their dry cleaner, they select it based on convenience, closest to their home. And so, really the thesis was, if we can bring this product directly to the consumer's doorstep, then we can be kind of the most convenient way to get your laundry done. And so that's kind of been our thesis since day one. We are based in Santa Monica, California. We currently operate in 6 cities across the United States in order of operation. They are Los Angeles, San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Boston, and Oakland. This company today is profitable at a city level. It's not profitable at a G&A level, so management and engineering. But every one of our cities. Thank you. Yeah, it's been pretty awesome. We reached that milestone probably about a quarter or two ago. But it's been something we've been focusing on for a really long time, and we're really proud of it. But as you know, it's a long way to go to full profitability, and that's what has been our focus. So.
Do you have an idea of how many cities you guys need to be into to achieve profitability?
I think it's definitely a significantly larger number than the amount of cities we're in today. But right now we're just really focused on optimizing the current markets that we're in. I would say that, it's probably a good, double to triple the size that we're at today, but I think we'll get there eventually.
Awesome. How many times when you were raising money, how much money have you guys raised, first of all?
Just under $20 million.
Okay, so it's not an insignificant amount of money. And how many times when you were raising did someone ask you why you were starting the company in LA? Why not San Francisco?
That's a great question. I mostly got that during the angel seed round when I was raising the first money. Obviously, now that the business is more established, we don't get that kind of question. But when we raised our first $500,000, I think there was a massive amount of pressure from these early investors for us to move the business up north and to be closer to Silicon Valley or San Francisco. I think, I discussed at length with my wife, are you ready to move up north and things like that? And I think, luckily, for my partner and I, we were able to sustain the business here in Los Angeles and kind of fight that off. And I think once the business started to really take off, no one ever questioned our physical location after that. But I'm really proud to be in Los Angeles, forming our company in Los Angeles, employing our people in Los Angeles. Obviously, we have employees all over the country, but I'm a Angelino. I was born and raised here. My parents were born and raised here. My mother's parents were born and raised here. So I've really been in Los Angeles a long time, and I love the Southern California weather. I love to go surfing, and I think it's been a really awesome place to build a startup community. Obviously, I get to work with people like you. Your wife is an incredible entrepreneur, and obviously, we're all really excited for the awesome win that Dollar Shave Club just had, another $1 billion exit in LA. So, it's been really, really awesome to be part of the community. I think it's a much smaller, tight-knit community, but it's growing rapidly.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I mean, I'm super proud of LA right now. Dollar Shave is just the most recent example, but there's so many companies here. There's so much success happening. It's not all media. You guys have nothing to do with media. I have nothing to do with media. My wife has nothing to do with media, and it's just great to see the city finally came of age. I read something else online. Sorry, I was Googling a lot in preparation for this, and I read that you gave an interview where you talked about goals. And I don't know if you still do this, but you said that you write down everyone's goals on Monday and review Friday to kind of measure the progress. Do you actually do that, and how successful has that been, and how religious are you about it? Do you do it every single week?
So definitely, it's definitely gone in ebbs and flows depending on kind of how the business is structured and whatnot. But I've almost always tried to run the business as close to agile software development as possible. And so I really try to follow that type of mentality. So, it really starts with kind of, starting your week on a Monday and really focusing on what you're trying to build throughout the week. Having a retrospective on Friday where you're able to just simply look back at the week, not necessarily to look forward to the future. And then daily stand-up meetings where you're able to discuss kind of what's going on. And I think if you follow that approach for management, it works very, very well in keeping everybody on pace and everybody up to speed on what's going on. I think, obviously it's very important to have, annual and quarterly meetings where you really set out your strategy and, what your focus is going forward. But, one of the things that's really important when you're running a company is that everybody's on the same page, and there's constant communication problems just because, we have email, we have phone, we have chat, we have all these different tools, but it's hard to be ubiquitous and get all the information flowing to everybody all at the same time. And so we found this, or I personally found this as a great way to keep everybody on pace.
And does the whole company do that? Have you sort of instilled that into the culture now?
I think, obviously from an engineering perspective, we do that. Everyone here at headquarters pretty much takes part, at least in the retrospective meetings on Friday. So we try to create it a little more communal, so we get, everybody kind of talking about their week and what they worked on. And it's really a great way for, I think, everybody to appreciate others for the things that they have worked on and really be up to speed. Sometimes there's not a big communication between maybe, an engineer and the operations team. But, once an engineer says, hey, I was working on this, they can see the direct reflection and how that affects their job and vice versa. So I think it's been awesome.
So I want to talk to you about customer service selfishly because that's my business today.
Sure.
And I'm curious, first, you as a consumer, not as the CEO of Washio, what is your style? Like, if you feel let down by a company, is there a very high threshold by which you will then pick up the phone or figure out how to get in touch and deal with it? Is it a very low threshold and you're kind of a principled consumer? Like, what kind of consumer are you?
I'm the kind of guy that doesn't, I don't like to feel like I got taken advantage of. And so if I feel like that is the case, then I will go at length to kind of fight for what I feel is like due or mine. I think from a customer service perspective, I'm probably a little more aggressive than other people in trying to get what I want, whether that be from an airline or an e-commerce site or anything else in between. Because I don't like to give up and I don't like to lose. And so, a lot of times when you're playing a customer service game against a very large organization, as it's very easy to...
A game?
Yeah, a game.
That's a very interesting word.
I think, it's very easy to give up, constantly, for example, you take a flight and the airline loses your bags and they say they'll give you your bags in 2 days, and it's easy to just say, okay, that's fine. But, if you have no bags, you have no clothes and you need to go shopping and, a lot of other things happen. So, I think it's important to kind of, fight for what's yours. And if you don't fight for it, you're not going to get it. And so I'm a huge fan of service. I don't know if you've looked at my account, but I've definitely, made a few claims. I've got
your account. That's the one search I do.
Come on, that's the first thing you should have done.
You're right.
Yeah, it's been great. I've gotten some airline credits. I have an open case right now. Yeah, it's been really awesome. I'm a huge fan.
Awesome. And so what are the companies that you think are doing customer service right in your mind? Some of the larger companies.
Do you mean private or public, or it doesn't matter?
Either one. Just experiences you think are great, and if there's any recent experience that you had that just blew you away. Sure.
So I would say, in no particular order, some of my top favorite customer service companies are Costco, Nordstrom's, Warby Parker, Airbnb, and Southwest Airlines. And all for a little bit of different reasons, but at the end of the day, if you really just think about it, a lot of them is just how long does it take to get somebody on the phone. And if you call Southwest Airlines, they just pick up the phone. You call Warby Parker, they just pick up the phone. And so that alone
I call Washio, does someone pick up the phone?
Someone will pick up the phone, yeah.
Great.
Yeah, we... I believe we have a really basic PBX system in now just because we get a little more phone calls than we'd like. And so we can't obviously pick up everything instantly, but for the most part, it's, direct line, you call in, somebody picks up the phone. And that's always been our objective here because no one wants to sit on hold. No one wants to wait for somebody. And we're really just trying to provide the best service we can. And so, we've cut that out. I think, when you look at some of these other companies, Warby Parker, give them a call, pick up the phone. Airbnb has an incredible service team, especially if something goes wrong. Costco's return policy is extraordinary, and then Nordstrom's obviously an incredible story, and there's a really great book on it if you haven't read it.
My father recently told me that he was returning a fax machine to Costco, which my first question was, why do you have a fax machine? And it was something like it was a fax printer combo thing, and it was something like 3 years old, and he was trying to, I guess, get it fixed. I don't know what he was trying to do, but long story short, he showed up at Costco with this old broken machine, and they took it back and gave him a full refund, and I was blown away when I heard that. So what you just said is a really good segue into my next question, because you said it's all about how quickly you can get someone on the phone. What do you think about Twitter and Facebook Messenger and other virtual channels? Intercom is trying to get businesses to do this. Like, where do you think we are in terms of people wanting to call our generation versus wanting to chat?
Yeah, so I think that's really interesting. Washio, we built our own SMS chat platform, so we're constantly sending our customers SMSs regarding their orders update, but any of our customers can just text us back and begin a text communication with our support team. So we've seen a lot of migration from phone over to text. We found that SMS is kind of the premier platform. I think we haven't done a lot on the Messenger platform, because I feel like anyone that has Messenger probably has some type of SMS as well. But I can see where there's value in some of those platforms. But I think Twitter, it seems to be more of a megaphone type platform where you can kind of complain out loud, and you sort of get attention through that format. But I think as you see over time, there isn't really a great format today to text some of these really large players. I couldn't text an airline and tell them to change my flight or accept a change fee, or move my flight.
You actually can now. I've done that on Twitter and Facebook Messenger, and it's really impressive what you can get done.
Wow. Any specific airlines, or all airlines, or what?
Every airline but American Airlines has responded to me on Facebook, and American has been great for me on Twitter. And I've been pretty surprised. I think large companies have sort of graduated their social media teams from being just firefighters that try to route you to actually agents that could actually do stuff for you.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I'm glad you've had success, but if I wanted to text American Airlines about my flight that was delayed yesterday, honestly, I wouldn't even know where to start. But if they started to say, hey, here's our text message number, just text us if you need help, and I could have a text communication. And obviously, as you know, with the addition of things like bots, they could really, really improve the service and make the system a lot faster.
How important do you think bots are going to be in this whole world? Because it seems like, going back to what you first said, how quickly can you get someone on the phone? Humans instinctually just want to talk to a person because they think the automated system or the bot's not going to be smart enough or helpful enough and waste their time, I think. Mm-hmm. But tech's getting pretty good, natural language processing is getting pretty good, bots are getting pretty smart. Like, how do you think in 10 years the default will be call an 800 number, send a message on Facebook Messenger, chat with a bot, like all three? What do you think people are going to do?
I think a lot of things can very much be automated that aren't automated today, and I think bots in that sense is a format of automation. And so, when I call an airline, it's usually one of maybe 5 reasons of why I'm calling. And so, there's probably a few reasons why I really need to talk to an agent, but for the most part, I really just want to find some resolution. And so, if I can put myself down a path where I can, basically communicate with a computer system as fast as physically possible, even faster than a human actually, and be able to resolve my problem, I think that's actually a great thing. I think where the problem lies is that when you do need that consumer, basically voice or phone or some type of human interaction, the problem is sometimes that the bot gets in the way, and you're not able to surpass that process, right? So, how many times do you get on the phone with an airline and you try to hit 0 as many times as you can, so you ignore, their PBX bot, right? So, I think it'll be challenging and it'll take time, but over time, I think it's going to be beneficial for the consumer and for the companies.
Our big bet is that it's far less annoying to chat with a bot that is on your own time, that's asynchronous, than push 1 for this and 3 for that. And we think that there's a lot to that, hopefully.
Yeah.
It makes it more convenient for consumers and saves companies money. All right, so basically, if I could sum up our conversation, it's the California Burrito Company led to the creation of TaskUs, and Uber led to the creation of Washio. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I think that's perfect.
Okay. Any final words, last words of wisdom to aspiring entrepreneurs? You know, it's not easy to start a company and run a company. You've done it a bunch of times. Any advice?
I think as I'm thinking back on this interview, you and I have both started multiple companies. I would say that almost none of our companies have any crossover except what we just found out about e-call, and mine was called Reminder Expert.
My competition.
Yeah. But what you'll notice, I think, between the both of us, besides that we wear dark T-shirts, is that and brick walls, is that we're both hustlers, man. And I think, at the end of the day, what it really comes down to is the hustle. And whether you're building a mobile software development company or a customer service company or a laundry company or a burrito company, it's all about the hustle and trying to figure it out and really just cranking it out until you get it done. So, thank you very much for this interview and for your time. And it's awesome, man.
Yeah, thank you, man. Appreciate the time,
cool.
And have a good day.
Thanks.
I'm going to go have a burrito now.
Okay, cool.
Bye.